Most of us have heard the gentle tune of Rock-a-Bye Baby, a lullaby whispered to infants for generations. Its melody feels tender, harmless, and timeless. But hidden beneath those soothing words lies a mystery that has unsettled historians and folklorists for centuries. Why does a cradle fall? Who is the baby? And what secret could possibly be wrapped inside a child's bedtime song? This documentary unravels the forgotten origins of one of the world's most familiar lullabies, tracing it back through the shadows of early modern England, royal intrigues, and the ancient symbolism of birth and collapse. No one knows exactly when Rock-a-Bye Baby was first sung, but its words drifted into history sometime in the late 17th or early 18th century, an age when lullabies were more than gentle songs. They were lessons, warnings, and mirrors of the world parents lived in. England was changing fast. Kingdoms rose and fell, monarchs struggled for power, and ordinary people carried those tensions into the stories and songs they passed on to their children. In that world, even a nursery rhyme could hold a message. The earliest printed version of Rock-a-Bye Baby appeared in the mid to late 18th century, around the time when ballads and small songbooks were popular across Britain. These were cheap, pocket-sized pamphlets that spread songs among working-class families. Many scholars believe the rhyme circulated orally long before it was ever written down. Like much of traditional folklore, its true beginning was not recorded by any author. It lived in voices, not on paper. Lullabies had a powerful place in early modern life. They were not only a way to soothe babies to sleep, but also a way to express fears and hopes that could not be spoken openly. Many mothers in villages and towns used lullabies to protect, to comfort, or even to warn. They sang about sickness, hunger, danger, and uncertainty. The rhythm and rhyme made these ideas easier to remember and pass down. In a time when literacy was rare, singing was one of the few ways ordinary people could carry wisdom from one generation to the next. The words of Rock-a-Bye Baby might sound simple, a cradle in a treetop, a wind blowing, and then a fall. But each image would have felt familiar to people living in that era. Cradles were often hung from beams or branches to rock infants gently, and winds were part of daily life in wooden homes that creaked with every gust. Yet, the way the rhyme describes the cradle falling and the baby tumbling down suggests something more symbolic than a bedtime scene. To understand why, we have to look at the time and place the song came from. The 17th and 18th centuries were full of political instability in Britain. The English Civil War had torn the nation apart in the 1600s, followed by the execution of a king and the temporary rise of the Commonwealth. Then came the Restoration, the Glorious Revolution, and constant battles over who had the right to rule. People were obsessed with questions of power, birth, and legitimacy, who was born to be a ruler and who was not. These themes often appeared in folk songs and rhymes that commented indirectly on the events of the day. One long-standing theory links Rock-a-Bye Baby to the birth of the son of King James II in 1688. According to this interpretation, the baby in the song may represent the newborn prince, and the cradle could be a symbol of the unstable monarchy. At the time, many in England suspected that the baby was not the true child of the Queen, but a secret substitution meant to ensure a Catholic heir. When King James was overthrown during the Glorious Revolution, the cradle, that is, the royal house, was indeed toppled by the wind or the changing political tide. This theory, while debated, shows how lullabies could encode political meaning. People could sing Rock-a-Bye Baby as a quiet act of commentary, expressing thoughts that might have been dangerous to say openly. It was a way to criticize authority under the safety of a children's song. Songs like these could travel freely, passed from mother to child, from home to street, without ever being written in official records. There are also other possible roots. Some researchers trace the rhyme not to England, but to early colonial America. According to one story, a pilgrim or traveler observed Native American mothers placing their babies in birch bark cradles that hung from tree branches. The wind would rock the infants gently to sleep, much like the motion described in the song. When this traveler returned to England, they supposedly wrote about it, inspiring the imagery of Rock-a-Bye Baby. This version of the story gives the song a transatlantic origin, a meeting point between European and indigenous traditions. Although it is hard to confirm, this explanation reminds us that lullabies often blend cultures. The 17th and 18th centuries were times of exploration and colonization. Songs and ideas crossed oceans just as quickly as ships did. The nursery rhymes that children heard in one country often carried fragments of another culture's stories. A simple melody could be a vessel for memory, traveling across generations and continents. Regardless of whether it began in England or America, Rock-a-Bye Baby quickly became part of English folk culture by the late 18th century. By then, printed versions appeared in songbooks and chapbooks, small publications sold by traveling peddlers. These printed rhymes helped standardize the lyrics, but local variations still existed. Some versions said, "The cradle will rock," while others added extra verses describing the baby's family or the mother's warning. Over time, the song settled into the short form we recognize today. Its persistence tells us something important. Lullabies survive because they carry emotional truth. They are not simply entertainment. They are reflections of human experience. In times when infant mortality was high and life was uncertain, songs about cradles and falling could serve both as expressions of fear and as a form of acceptance. The world was unstable, and people used stories and songs to make sense of that instability. The cradle in the treetop may have originally symbolized more than just a child's bed. In folklore, trees often represented life, growth, and connection between earth and sky. A cradle perched in a tree could suggest the fragile balance between safety and danger, between the human world and the forces of nature. The wind that blows might stand for fate, chance, or even divine will. When the bough breaks and the cradle falls, it reflects the moment when that balance is lost. To parents singing the lullaby centuries ago, this might not have been a strange image. It was a reminder of vulnerability, how quickly peace can be disturbed, and how little control people truly have over their lives. Songs like this gave comfort by acknowledging those fears indirectly. A mother could sing about a cradle falling and, in doing so, face her own anxieties without saying them aloud. By the 19th century, Rock-a-Bye Baby had become firmly part of English-speaking culture. It appeared in collections of nursery rhymes alongside others like Humpty Dumpty and Jack and Jill, both of which also feature falls and accidents. These recurring themes show how older societies used children's rhymes to reflect adult realities: war, disease, and political upheaval. Each fall was a miniature tragedy, but also a lesson. What rises must eventually fall. The Industrial Revolution only deepened the song's relevance. As cities grew and traditional family life changed, the lullaby stayed with people as a link to a simpler, if harsher, past. Mothers in crowded factory towns sang the same words that their rural ancestors once did, giving their children a sense of continuity in a rapidly changing world. Over time, the original context faded, but the emotion remained. The spread of the song across the English-speaking world also meant new interpretations. In America, it was sung in nurseries, recorded in early phonograph cylinders, and later became a staple in children's books and films. Yet even as it grew familiar, some listeners continued to sense something eerie beneath its surface. That strange mix of comfort and danger, of rocking and falling, that defines its rhythm. As the centuries turned, Rock-a-Bye Baby stopped being just a familiar lullaby and began to attract serious attention from historians, folklorists, and even political theorists. What seemed like a simple nursery rhyme was gradually revealed to be a complex artifact of its time, a piece of cultural memory that could be interpreted in more than one way. Its mystery deepened as new discoveries, theories, and interpretations emerged. each pulling the song in a different direction. The conflict at the heart of Rockabye Baby is not a single event, but a battle between meanings. Was it a political statement disguised as a lullaby? A myth about nature and fate? Or a simple folk song born from daily life? As interest in folklore grew during the 19th and early 20th centuries, these questions became the focus of study and debate. The search for the song's true origin became a story in itself, full of competing voices, shifting evidence, and the kind of mystery that history rarely settles. One of the earliest attempts to decode the song's meaning came from 19th-century collectors of nursery rhymes, such as James Orchard Halliwell, an English scholar who gathered traditional verses into large anthologies. Halliwell's version of Rockabye Baby appeared in his collections published in the 1840s, and by then the rhyme was already widespread. Yet he did not offer much explanation for its meaning, perhaps because even he sensed that its origins were uncertain. His work, however, set off a wave of scholarly curiosity that would grow over the next century. As the Victorian era advanced, researchers began to notice how many children's rhymes contained hidden social or political messages. This was the age when folklore became a serious subject of study. Scholars like Sir George Lawrence Gome and others in the newly formed Folklore Society treated old songs as coded records of earlier ways of life. When they looked at Rockabye Baby, they saw more than a cradle. They saw a metaphor for instability, for systems of power that could be shaken by outside forces. This idea connected the rhyme to one of England's most dramatic political changes, the fall of the Stuart monarchy. As discussed by several 19th-century commentators, the theory about King James II's son, the warming pan baby, as rumors called him, remained one of the strongest explanations. The image of a cradle rocking dangerously was too close to the story of a royal lineage in jeopardy to be ignored. Even though there was no direct proof that the song was written about that event, the metaphor was persuasive. It captured the mood of a people who had watched a dynasty lose its balance. By the early 20th century, however, new interpretations began to appear, often shaped by the modern world's fascination with psychology and symbolism. As Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung introduced ideas about the unconscious and archetypes, scholars began to view nursery rhymes as expressions of collective fears and desires. A lullaby, after all, is one of the earliest ways humans express both comfort and anxiety. The words, "When the bough breaks, the cradle will fall," could be read as a mother's fear of loss, or even as humanity's awareness of how fragile life truly is. During this time, folklorists like Iona and Peter Opie, who published influential works in the mid-20th century, helped reframe nursery rhymes as living cultural documents. They emphasized that meanings could shift over time, that a rhyme's original purpose might be lost, but new meanings could take its place. For them, Rockabye Baby was not just a reflection of one specific historical moment. It was an ongoing conversation between generations. Each singer, whether a royalist, a farmer, or a modern parent, added something to its story. Meanwhile, outside the world of academia, popular writers and enthusiasts began spinning their own theories, some historical and others deeply imaginative. One idea linked the song to ancient fertility rituals. In old European traditions, trees often symbolized life and birth, while rocking cradles and swinging motions were believed to protect children or encourage growth. The fall of the cradle could then represent the natural cycle of life, the inevitable decline that follows creation. In that reading, Rockabye Baby becomes not a warning about politics, but a reflection of humanity's relationship with nature, echoing ancient myths about birth, decay, and renewal. Another theory took a more global turn. Some believed that the song's imagery of cradles and trees came from early colonial encounters with indigenous peoples in North America. As mentioned before, travelers reported seeing babies suspended from branches in cradleboards, rocked by the wind. When these travelers returned to England, they may have shared the image, and over time, it entered folklore. While there is little direct evidence to confirm this, the story persisted because it fit the pattern of cultural exchange in that era. Europe was fascinated by the New World, and many songs and tales borrowed imagery from it. The 20th century also saw the song take on new meaning in popular culture. In the early 1900s, as the recording industry began, "Rock-a-Bye Baby" was among the first nursery rhymes to be recorded on phonograph cylinders and gramophone records. It became a staple of children's entertainment, sung by early film stars and later featured in cartoons and radio shows. The irony is that the more it was commercialized, the more its dark undertones stood out. Listeners began to notice how strange it was that a lullaby about a falling cradle became so popular with children. This tension, between innocence and danger, fascinated audiences. In the 1950s and 1960s, as social critics began examining the hidden meanings of childhood culture, "Rock-a-Bye Baby" was often cited as an example of how older societies used songs to teach about life's harsh realities. The rhyme, they argued, reminded children from the start that the world was uncertain. It prepared them for disappointment, just as fairy tales once did with their wolves, witches, and giants. In the following decades, the song appeared in darker settings. It was used in films and novels to create unease or symbolize hidden danger. The contrast between its sweet melody and ominous words made it perfect for moments of suspense. By the late 20th century, "Rock-a-Bye Baby" had become more than a lullaby. It was a cultural symbol, something that could stand for innocence lost, for the fragility of life, or for the collapse of false security. Meanwhile, some historians continued to dig deeper, hoping to find concrete proof of its original intent. In old archives and printed songbooks, they traced its journey from oral folklore to printed rhyme. What they found was that every version reflected the time in which it was recorded. The earliest printings emphasized the imagery of nature. Later ones added moral lessons or softened the language to suit polite audiences. The constant evolution suggested that the song was never fixed. It changed to mirror society itself. In this way, "Rock-a-Bye Baby" became a kind of cultural time capsule. Each era used it to express what people feared most. In the 17th century, it might have been political instability. In the 19th century, industrial hardship. In the 20th, psychological anxiety and cultural loss. The rhyme survived because its core image, a cradle rocked by forces beyond control, could be applied to almost any kind of crisis. An unexpected development came in the 21st century as digital media revived public interest in old songs and folklore. Online forums and researchers began re-examining "Rock-a-Bye Baby" with fresh eyes. Some linguists suggested that the rhythm of the song mimics the physical act of rocking, a universal human motion that calms infants across cultures. In this view, the words themselves may have been secondary to the rhythm. The melody mattered more than the message. Over time, the words might have been added simply because they fit the sound. At its heart, "Rock-a-Bye Baby" is not just a lullaby about sleep and safety. It is a poetic reflection on the fragility of life and power. Every element in the song, the tree, the wind, the cradle, and the fall, carries a deeper symbolic meaning that reaches beyond nursery walls. Over the centuries, people have read these images as commentaries on nature, human emotion, and social order. To understand its impact, we must explore why such a simple rhyme has remained powerful for so long, and why it continues to stir unease even in modern times. The image of the cradle in the treetop is perhaps the most striking. On a literal level, it seems dangerous, a baby resting above the ground, rocked by the wind. But symbolically, the cradle represents innocence, beginnings, and new life. The tree, often seen in ancient traditions as a link between heaven and earth, turns the cradle into something sacred. It suggests that birth and growth are suspended between two forces, stability and uncertainty. The higher the cradle, the greater the potential fall. This image has echoed through myths from many cultures. In Norse mythology, the world tree, Yggdrasil, connects all realms of existence and supports the cycle of life. In early Celtic traditions, trees were believed to hold spirits, guiding both birth and death. The idea of placing a cradle in a tree may carry a distant echo of these beliefs. The child resting close to the divine, yet still at risk of falling back to the earth. The wind in the rhyme is another powerful symbol. It is the unseen force that disturbs the balance, reminding us that stability is temporary. In literature and religion, wind has long represented change, a messenger of fate or transformation. In the Bible, the wind often appears as a sign of divine power, while in Greek mythology it was personified as the anemoi, the gods of directional winds, each with their own moods and consequences. When the lullaby says, "When the wind blows, the cradle will rock," it describes more than a physical movement. It portrays the eternal truth that life is always in motion, and that no cradle, no person, no kingdom can remain perfectly still. The breaking of the bough completes the sequence. It is the moment of loss, collapse, and revelation. The fall has been interpreted as a warning, a natural consequence, or even an inevitable part of life's cycle. Many old lullabies, not just this one, contain some form of fall or danger. Ring a Roses, for instance, ends with everyone falling down, possibly symbolizing death or illness. Humpty Dumpty tells of a fall that cannot be repaired. These patterns show that older societies used children's songs to prepare the young for the unpredictability of life. Safety was never permanent. Through repetition and rhyme, these songs turned fear into understanding. What makes Rock-a-Bye Baby unique, however, is how its imagery extends far beyond the nursery. The cradle has often been seen as a metaphor for nations, systems, or leaders. The idea that something high and powerful could suddenly fall has resonated deeply across centuries of social change. During the French Revolution, some writers used similar metaphors to describe the fall of monarchs. In the 19th century, political cartoonists in Britain and America would draw cradles of power being rocked or overturned by the winds of change. Even if they did not directly reference the lullaby, its language had become part of the cultural vocabulary. By the 20th century, the song's symbolic weight had crossed into literature and psychology. Writers and filmmakers used it to express themes of innocence and destruction. In some films, the lullaby plays quietly in the background of scenes involving danger or moral collapse, using the contrast between melody and meaning to create tension. The image of a cradle rocking by itself, empty, fragile, or unstable, became a powerful symbol for the loss of innocence. The words, "When the bough breaks," began to appear in book titles, plays, and poems, always suggesting that something once secure was about to give way. In psychology, some theorists interpreted lullabies like Rock-a-Bye Baby as expressions of a universal parental fear, the anxiety that something beyond control could harm a child. Singing about that danger allowed parents to acknowledge it safely. The gentle rhythm of the song soothes both singer and listener, transforming fear into calm. This combination of comfort and unease is one reason the lullaby remains emotionally potent. It mirrors the human experience. We seek peace even when surrounded by uncertainty. Across cultures, this balance between tenderness and danger appears in many lullabies. In Russian tradition, for example, the song "Bayu Bayushki Bayu" warns children not to sleep near the edge of the bed, or "The gray wolf will carry you away." In some African lullabies, mothers sing of spirits watching over the child, but also remind them to stay pure and respectful. In Japanese lullabies, such as Edo Komoriuta, mothers express sorrow and exhaustion while rocking their children. These songs, like Rock-a-Bye Baby, use gentle words to carry deeper truths about fear, responsibility, and the fragility of life. This pattern suggests that lullabies everywhere serve a dual purpose. They calm the child, but they also help adults process their own emotions. In times when people could not easily express grief or anxiety, songs became emotional tools. A mother singing about a falling cradle might not truly expect disaster, but through song, she acknowledges that danger exists and that love continues despite it. Over time, Rock-a-Bye Baby also came to represent a broader cultural theme. the cycle of rise and fall that defines human history. The cradle rising and falling mirrors the fortunes of empires, ideologies, and civilizations. Scholars who study folklore often point out that societies project their collective experiences into simple stories. The lullaby's structure, stability, disturbance, collapse, parallels the way history unfolds. That is why it can be seen as both personal and political, intimate and universal. Its impact reached even into modern popular culture. In the mid-20th century, the song was referenced in music, television, and film to evoke nostalgia, irony, or unease. Horror movies sometimes used it to contrast innocence with fear, while dramas and comedies employed it as a symbol of childhood or lost simplicity. The melody became a shorthand for vulnerability, something fragile enough to be shattered by a single gust of wind. Even today, filmmakers use the opening notes of the lullaby to signal that something pure is about to be threatened. Beyond entertainment, Rock-a-Bye Baby continues to inspire researchers in anthropology and linguistics. Studies of oral tradition show that such songs persist because they serve universal human needs. They connect rhythm, emotion, and memory in a way that writing cannot. The act of rocking a baby while singing reinforces a bond of trust, creating a moment of calm that links generations. That the same song can survive for centuries, across countries and languages, speaks to the shared emotional truths it carries. Interestingly, modern psychology has found that lullabies can influence not just mood, but also brain development. The gentle rhythm and repetition can slow a baby's heartbeat, regulate breathing, and strengthen the emotional connection between parent and child. When viewed through this lens, Rock-a-Bye Baby gains a scientific dimension. It is not merely symbolic, but functional, a tool for comfort and survival. Its dark undertones may even enhance its effect, giving emotional depth that pure sweetness would lack. The endurance of the song also raises questions about memory and meaning. Why do we keep singing words that describe something unsettling? The answer may lie in the human tendency to preserve what is emotionally charged. Songs that mix fear and love, danger and comfort, tend to survive because they reflect the full range of human experience. They teach resilience by acknowledging risk. In that sense, Rock-a-Bye Baby is less about a literal cradle and more about the human condition, our attempt to find peace while knowing that change is inevitable. When viewed globally, lullabies perform this same task across all societies. They speak of sleep, but also of mortality. They offer hope, yet whisper warning. They remind both child and adult that every calm night carries the possibility of storm. And perhaps that is why Rock-a-Bye Baby still feels relevant. Its symbols are not tied to a single culture or moment. They express something timeless. In today's world, where uncertainty once again shapes our lives, the song's message still resonates. The cradle may now represent fragile economies, technologies, or relationships. The wind might be the unpredictable force of change in our globalized age. The fall, always feared, always expected, becomes a lesson in humility. Every generation faces its own bow breaking, and every time we return to the same simple melody as if it holds a quiet wisdom that words alone cannot express. Through its journey from oral folklore to modern icon, Rock-a-Bye Baby has become a mirror of humanity itself. It reminds us that vulnerability is universal, and that the act of soothing a child is also a way of soothing our collective anxiety about loss and impermanence. In that sense, it is one of the oldest psychological instruments we have, an art form that transforms fear into tenderness. Rock-a-Bye Baby endures because it speaks to something deep and unchanging in human nature. Beneath its soft rhythm lies a truth about balance, power, and the inevitability of change. Whether seen as a political allegory, a reflection of ancient belief, or a meditation on life's fragility, the lullaby remains timeless. Its melody crosses borders, its message transcends centuries, and its warning still feels familiar. The cradle rocks, the wind blows, and the world shifts once again. Yet we keep singing, as if the act of singing itself keeps the fall at bay.